A very, very good afternoon to everybody that might be watching, anyone that might be watching. My name is Mark Drax. I am sitting on the board of SASH, and I have the delightful pleasure today to be joined by Ash Choi. I'm going to read from my other screen here, Ash. I'm going to introduce you by telling our viewers that you are a queer, trans, and non-binary psychotherapist at the Sexuality, Attachment, and Trauma Project based in New York City. They provide support for trans and non-binary clients coping with transphobia, as well as navigating gender identity and sexual exploration and development. Ash, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
It's fantastic to have you, Ash. It really is. You are going to be on a panel at our conference in October in Atlanta, and today I'm going to bounce a bunch of questions around with you, so that people that might be coming to the conference, I might just want to have a look at what you're up to on our website. Can you get a better understanding of you? How's that?
Sounds great.
Fantastic. Yeah. Right, so I got a bunch of questions on my left-hand screen here. So if I look left, I promise you I'm not checking my emails. I'm very much with you. Ash, I'm going to kick off by asking you, who inspired you to come to this work and to do the work that you do?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily like who inspired me, but it's more so what inspired me, which is that I experienced a lack of queer and trans Korean therapists living in Texas and growing up in the US. And when I went to a conference for queer and trans Koreans, we all collectively just kind of acknowledge that we don't have a lot of support systems outside of our family and friends. So because of this lack, like structural lack, I wanted to, add myself to the list, hopefully a growing list of Korean therapists in the country that can be more queer and trans affirming.
Actually, we were chatting just before we came on camera, and you were born and raised in Korea, and you've ended up in Texas and now New York. I mean, you've had a fascinating journey in its own right. Would that have been a big part of, or certainly a part of the motivation that's drawn you into this work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be removed from my country and to live in Texas where there's hardly any Asian, like let alone Korean community. So I think I had to forge and carve my own community and meet my own people, and that led to like organizing the first ever national conference for queer and trans people in April 2018. So I think meeting other people and us just commiserating together, being in solidarity, like we need more people like us, more healers like us, more therapists for ourselves. So I think that really inspired me and still inspires me to this day to do the work that I'm doing.
I think it's wonderful to bring so much of your personal journey to the work you do. So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
Give me something that you knew when you started out as a clinician. What's one thing you wish you knew, I should say, when you started out as a clinician that would have helped you more today?
I think I wish I had known how like invasive the traditional intake process can look like at a clinic, because when a client comes to a clinic and they're interested in receiving treatment, they like fill out a bunch of paperwork, right? Like what their childhood was like, why they're seeking therapy, like what happened to them. And I think I just knew too much at first when I first started practicing and interning. And I think that really interrupted my clients' agency of telling me their own stories on their own terms. So I think I wish I had known that. Maybe I would have read it less, or maybe I wouldn't have read it at all, but I wish I had known it so that I don't have any preconceived notion before meeting someone for the first time who wants to tell me their stories and like what happened to them and why they're here.
So if I understand you, are you saying that in your opinion, some of the entrance procedures to treatment centers is too clinical, it's not personal enough? Is that what you're saying?
I think it's too clinical and too revealing, right? Because I think there's a lot of questions that are like, what's your sexuality, your gender, like, why you're here, and what was your childhood like, what's your family history, your medical history. And I think that's all very important information to know, of course. But I think for them to write all of those things down and for me to read it before I get to meet them for the first time, it stays on my mind. I'm like, oh, I know why you're here. These things happen to you, and I think that can interrupt like the authentic flow of a treatment session. So I think that's something that I wish I had known. And even to this day, I get referrals, and I like the way that we do things at the like sexuality, attachment, and trauma project, because we don't have any rigorous intake process. It's just we're like, hey, this is this person, they're like this old, this 31 years old, looking for this. Do you want to meet them? And then I meet them, and it's just so nice to just learn about this person from their own terms.
That's beautiful. So take that one step further. What advice would you give to professionals, a new professional entering this particular aspect of our industry?
I would say don't even be one step ahead, like ahead of your client. Respect their process, respect their pace. Even if you think you know, you don't know. So be a co-theorist in the room with your client. They are the expert. I mean, you hear this all the time, but they bring so much expertise about their life. So I would say be next to them, not like 10 steps ahead, which is what I was like when I first started. I was so eager to know. And I was like, oh, it's because this happened to you. And then it really interrupted and disrupted our treatment. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. When you come to Atlanta in October, you're going to be on a panel. Tell our viewers, what do you see, where do you see that leading, and what do you think are the messages you would like to get out by being on that panel?
Right. I know that this is a sexual health conference, so you might wonder why gender affirming care? Like, why does that have to do with sexual health? And I want all the clinicians and participants coming to our conference to know that, you know, gender impacts the way we see our sexual desire, sexual health, desirability, and sexuality. So I want our clinicians to come and learn about how that can be interdependent with one another, and how both gender like dysphoria and euphoria can impact the way that their clients understand their sexual health. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, love to just, can you be more specific? How does this affect sexual health? Can you give some specific examples?
Yeah, for sure. So when I provide gender affirming like support letters for clients who are looking to get like top surgery or vaginoplasty or whatever gender affirming procedures they're getting, one of the most common stories I hear is how their dysphoria about their body really impacts the way they, you know, allow themselves to be seen, touched, and loved by their loved ones, right? Like, because they have this like dysphoric relationship with their body, like the way that they have sex or don't have sex is just so what's the word I'm looking for? It's really decreasing their quality of life. So I think when I say that, I mean that when someone comes in and they're like, I feel really dysphoric about this part of my body, and if I could get this gender affirming care, I think I'll feel really euphoric, right? I'm just putting in a very simpler term. Sure. And that can really impact the way that I allow myself to access desire. And I think that can lead to the topics of like how that can impact sexual health.
Tell me, I'm sitting here having a little relational moment here.
Yeah.
To do with, and you tell me if I'm going too far off the page here. But when it comes to masculinity, femininity, sensuality, I'm 54 years of age and I'm 6'8" tall. So you look at me coming down the street, I'm a huge guy, very tall. And if I were living in the as I did in the shadow of my very Victorian parents for many, many years, going back right up until probably 2014, like it was, you would have seen a typical tall, hopefully well-groomed English gentleman, but very much looking like how my father needed me to look, which was very alpha male.
Mm.
But for a massive part of the first half century of my life, I did not feel like the alpha male. I felt
Mm.
much more feminine than I was ever allowed to express. And when when my father died in 2017, and then my mother died in 2019, I finally I felt free to feel more sensually feminine in this huge male body.
Wow.
Is
Right.
is this is this relating to what we're talking about here, or am I off the page here?
Oh, you're so on the page, and you're not only are you on the page, but also I think you just captured the way that all of us are impacted by gender, right?
Right.
Whether you're cisgender or transgender, like gender is just something that happens to us, right? Just like how you didn't feel like man enough or alpha male enough, right? And only when your parents left this plane of existence could you access other parts of yourself of gender that you couldn't access before, right? So I think the way that you framed it is something that I'm always curious about with my clients, whether they're cis or trans or questioning, right?
Mm.
Because a lot of us feel like a lot of us, again, I'm saying a lot of us, not all of us, right? So I don't
Sure.
generalize everyone's life, but a lot of us feel like we failed at our gender, like whether you're cis or trans. And I think to think that gender is something that we can fail at is it's so interesting, as
Mm.
opposed to something that's always changing and flexible and transformative and relational, right? So I think um, I I hope that the panel that I will be speaking on will help our participants to like really relate their own experiences with gender to whatever we're talking about
Mm.
when it comes to providing gender affirming care to our clients.
Thank you. Well, it's something that very close to my heart. That's why I was thrilled when I was asked to do this particular interview,
Yeah.
because I relate to it. And of course, some of my male clients come to me with big issues. Some of my male clients are older than me. So they were born at the end of a very Victorian era. And the Victorian era in England, as you may well know, is kind of probably similar to the Pilgrim Fathers in your country. It was very damning of sexuality. It was very critical. Sex was something that was almost seen as a necessary evil. It
Mm.
wasn't something to be celebrated, let alone sexuality. And now, of course, we've come in some areas of our planet, we've come a long way from that. Sadly, in others, we haven't. And that, of course, is the tragedy. Human beings are still not free to be human beings.
Right.
And that's why I love what you're doing. And that's why when I help my men, if I have a man who I sense into is still suppressing a big part of himself because mummy and daddy told him it was wrong or bad or not worthy or whatever it might be, I go to great lengths to celebrate that part of my
Right.
client and help him realize today that he must live for who he really feels he is and not play a role, act like an actor just to please long dead parents in many cases.
Right.
It's amazing how much that stigma still follows people through their life.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Tell me, the last 2 to 3 years of all our existence has been pretty crazy. And I think we've probably all heard enough about the pandemic, and it largely is hopefully behind us. But do you notice anything particular that's changed from end of 2019, which is the last time we all traveled without a mask on, through to now, through your work? Have you seen anything evolving through the last 2.5 years because of what we've been through?
Oh, what a great big question. I think
I know it might take a day to answer, but give it a
I
go.
know, right? I think if I have to choose one answer that applies to what I'm talking about or what we've been talking about, Mark, is when people started to quarantine, they stopped performing their ideas of gender, right? Like they were on their own in their room. They no longer put on the kind of gender affirming clothes they have to wear. Like for example, for like cis women or people who are feminine, like they're expected to put on makeup, right? But as they start to quarantine in their own private home, I think people started to really question, like, who am I performing this for, right? And why does this not feel good? Because I think when they have a lot of time to be present in their own bodies, I think they start to question what doesn't feel good in their body anymore. So I think one of the biggest things that changed since the end of 2019 to now is people's relationships to gender performance, right? I think cis or trans. Why do I have to wear this thing to feel good in my body? Or like, why doesn't this feel good in my body anymore? When I hear certain pronouns like she, her, that used to feel okay on my body, why do I have a reaction to this? Why is my body rejecting this? I think they became more present. And again, not all of us, but I think most people really became present with what their bodies are rejecting or accepting. And I think uh, gender was part of their reflection and acknowledgement as of late. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. That's an amazing answer. So what you're saying is people have got a lot more real with themselves. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah.
And what an immense move forward that is. It's not necessarily going to make life in certain places for certain people any easier, because there is still transphobia, and that's, God knows how long that's going to take to truly evaporate. Maybe not in my lifetime, maybe not in yours, but at least people can feel more comfortable in their skin, which is a massive step forward for so many people who've been living this role and doing what they feel society needs them to do, needs them to be, needs them to wear, etc.
Yeah. Right.
Amazing.
And I think one last thing I would add to that is a lot of people are like, oh, so everyone is non-binary now or trans now, right? But I think it's just that people simply did not have time to think about themselves and to wonder and be curious about what they are and who they like and who they are. And when the pandemic first started, a lot of people were at home and they had time for the first time. Like, they didn't have to go into the office. Again, not all of us, but I think that really allowed people to like really see their humanity in a fuller way, right?
I don't know whether you're going to agree with the statement that I'm about to make. I believe that every single human being is on a spectrum, and every single man has a part of them which is very feminine, and every single woman has a part of her which is very masculine. How we express it is so often so biased by what we are told is right and wrong by parents who are themselves biased. And so there's no point following it back. What we have to do, in my opinion, is start to simply teach people that they're okay in their own body, in their own skin.
Right.
And we stop letting society put so much bias into young children and grooming them to be the children we need them to be.
Right.
That's what I think is one of the biggest problems with our society.
I agree. Yeah. Like, imagine what our society would look like if we all operated on that theory that we are all on a spectrum where we can always transform and oscillate between so many things, and we are still ourselves, and not these expectations of someone else's expectations, right?
Exactly. I think I long for the day where if a woman wants to get up and stride out the door and feels very masculine and strong, she can dress as a man, and a man can do the same. If he is feeling very feminine, can walk out the door dressing in a very feminine way to express how he feels today, without everyone looking through sort of faded eyes, going, "Oh my God, look at so and so." Why can't we just let another human being be another human being? If they're not hurting anybody and they're going about their life with a healthy intent, what is so wrong with that?
Right.
It baffles me.
And if that happened, right, when our society becomes one where people can just go out the window and wear whatever they want, like women or men, the very people that will be freed from that, like the most, what I'm trying to say is the people that will benefit from that most would be trans people, right? Because now when they are expressing their gender in a way that feels affirming, like it won't be so like special anymore. It won't be so stigmatizing anymore because all of us are doing it, right? So I think it's a collective effort. Like so I think when we think about how gender expansiveness can free all of us, I think trans people will be the first ones to be like really be feeling free and like liberated from societal stigmatization, like transphobia and violence. So yeah, that's what came to my mind when you were saying that.
So I'm going to amusingly disagree with you on one point. I agree that the obvious group of people who are that you refer to, they're going to be the ones that benefit the most. However, I'm going to extend that and say that I think a staggering, an exponentially large number of people will benefit beyond the group you've just talked about, the groups you work so hard, because there are so many people who actually want to step out into freedom, but are so afraid to do so.
Right.
So I think actually you'd see an exponential explosion of people living for themselves, feeling safe to live for who they really feel they are. That's what that'll be a dream of mine. In other words, see this explosion of color, culture, joyousness go way beyond just the LGBTQ, et cetera, environment. See it, let everybody be who they want. If people want to be androgynous, let them be androgynous. If they want to, doesn't matter who they want to see, who they feel they are, let them be that person. I think that would be a dream.
Right. And I'm going to disagree with your
Go for it. Good.
You're right. I think quantitatively speaking, yes, so many more people will be freed and liberated from this concept. But I think right now in this current material reality, trans people face, gender violence the most, right?
I agree with you.
Especially trans women. So I think when like cis people start to perform their gender freely and expressively, like whether it's like men wearing a dress or like women wearing like suits, right? Like whatever you want to, however you want to call it. Yeah, they will be free. But I think when that does not become an issue anymore to society, I think in this current condition, I think trans people will benefit from it the most, right? Maybe not in quantity, but in like material quality, right? Yes.
I'm going to go full circle and 100% agree with you. Okay. I think I was sitting here fantasizing about the dream of planet Earth, whereas you've brought me back to reality, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that would be the dream. And I share that hope with you, Mark, that all of us can live like that. And how amazing would that be if that happened? And so I think we all agreed and disagreed here together.
It's the fun and joy of having adult conversations these days. It took me a while to figure that one out too. Ash, tell us, this has been an amazing conversation, and I can't wait for you to present at our conference, which I'm so grateful. Any final words you would like to leave, any takeaway you would like to leave our viewers with before we sign off today?
Right. Well, thank you for listening so far, if you have. And if you're coming to the conference, I would love for you to check out our panel. And I and my co-presenter, Daniel, will be talking on providing gender affirming care. So if that's something that you have been curious about or struggling with in your own practice, I would love for you to come and we can have a chat like the way Mark and I just did in the last 30 minutes.
Fantastic. Ash, it has been a real pleasure to meet you. Well, all I can say is keep safe until October and see you at the conference. Thank you so much for giving up some of your time today.
Thank you. Thank you too, Mark. Thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. God bless. Big hug from England. Take care.